BlackRock, the largest asset manager in the world, confirms a massive Bitcoin price explosion for 2025. They didn't put it quite that dramatically, but we're going to take a look at the thematic outlook for 2025 that BlackRock just released. In it, they talk about massive catalysts that suggest further rising Bitcoin prices. Plus, we're going to check out the new AfD election program because, believe it or not, we actually have Bitcoin listed in an election program for the first time. In it, they talk about massive catalysts that point to further rising Bitcoin prices. We also take a look at the new AfD election manifesto, because this is actually the first time that Bitcoin has been mentioned in an election manifesto. The final clause is now being confirmed here. First things first, let's take a look at BlackRock's thematic outlook for 2025. And it's now well known that BlackRock is heavily betting on Bitcoin, and Larry Fink keeps dropping massive Bitcoin takes on TV. Now, a clip has actually surfaced where the outlook for 2025 is summarized in a short segment. In this clip, BlackRock talks about what could cause Bitcoin to rise significantly in price soon. Now a clip has actually appeared here in which the outlook for 2025 is summarized in a small excerpt. And here, BlackRock is talking about what could cause Bitcoin to rise significantly in price soon.
In our 2025 outlook, we show how monetary policy could benefit some themes. Rising rates hurt companies with floating rate debt or long cash flows. Fed rate cuts in 2025 may ease pressures, creating opportunities. Benefiting could be biotech stocks. Bitcoin may gain from falling rates. But with the Fed expected to continue cutting rates in 2025, these pressures may ease, presenting new opportunities for investors. One area that may benefit are biotech stocks. Bitcoin may also benefit from declining rates. While we believe Bitcoin's long-term adoption trajectory will be primarily driven by its fundamental use case as a global monetary alternative, amid monetary and geopolitical uncertainty. In 2021, professional investors might take another look at Bitcoin as rates drop. With lower interest rates, the opportunity cost of holding non-yielding assets like Bitcoin or gold goes down, which can make them more appealing compared to yield-bearing assets like bonds. If you want to learn more about the key themes for 2025, head over to iShares.com to read our full thematic outlook.
And here they make it very clear what the bullish case for Bitcoin 2025 looks like. They expect a change in monetary policy, and with falling interest rates, Bitcoin could benefit, predicting an increase in Bitcoin's price. 2023 had high interest rates, tough for risk stocks and Bitcoin, so they are indirectly predicting a massive increase in the Bitcoin price. They say that 2022 and 2023 were marked by a high interest environment, which made things tough for risk stocks and, of course, for Bitcoin as well, even though Bitcoin didn't perform too badly in 2023. But now that we have a change in monetary policy, Bitcoin is going to be significantly boosted because we're suddenly shifting to a low interest rate environment. We're moving from a high interest level to a low interest level. But with this change in monetary policy, Bitcoin is going to be massively boosted because we're suddenly switching to a low interest rate environment. We're moving from a high interest level to a low interest level. That's also the correlation I've talked about a lot, where Bitcoin is 83% correlated with the money supply. Of course, there will always be some pullbacks in the short term. Now we're seeing a bit of a contraction, but according to BlackRock, that contraction is going to stop very quickly, and this will continue to propel Bitcoin forward significantly. They're also talking about the opportunity cost compared to bonds, which are dropping now because you're getting less interest on your government bonds since rates are falling. That's why investors are leaning more towards riskier assets now. They're also talking about biotech stocks and Bitcoin. And according to BlackRock, these two asset classes are going to benefit particularly. What I found really interesting is that this forecast, or the first analysis they're doing here, is only a short to medium-term analysis for Bitcoin. In the long run, Bitcoin is driven by its use case as a monetary alternative, especially during inflation, geopolitical challenges, war, or chaos. Michael Saylor often mentions that Bitcoin thrives in chaos, while traditional assets struggle. In the short term, Bitcoin can be affected by shocks or conflicts, but it benefits from poor monetary policy and conflict as people seek censorship-resistant assets. Michael Saylor says Bitcoin thrives in chaos. Unlike traditional assets, Bitcoin may be affected by shocks or war. It gains from poor monetary policy and conflict as people seek censorship-resistant assets. You have to look at the big picture because, in the short term, Bitcoin can definitely be pulled down by shocks, by war events, or whatever. But in the long run, Bitcoin really benefits from poor monetary policy and maybe even from conflict, because people tend to flee to censorship-resistant assets. That's at least the prediction from BlackRock. And it's really exciting to see how this plays out, with BlackRock not just being bullish on Bitcoin in the short to medium term, but also expecting that Bitcoin will actually come out on top in the long run. And fittingly, we actually have the news from North Korea that they're now providing unlimited liquidity for the markets. South Korea is responding to economic uncertainties with strong measures. After the declaration of martial law, the government announced that it would provide unlimited liquidity to stabilize the financial and currency markets. Emergency meetings took place late in the evening, and detailed steps will be announced tomorrow. Daily discussions about the situation are planned. So in South Korea, the situation is escalating, and if something geopolitical happens, like issues with the opposition, then martial law would be declared, and so on. And when there are such problems, the market will just be flooded with liquidity. You see this time and again, and that's exactly what BlackRock is aiming for, that we're going to see a lot more liquidity in the market now, and that's going to drive the Bitcoin price up significantly. In China, we've also announced similar packages with Kiwi, and who knows what else is coming in Europe. In the US, there aren't any key programs yet, but I'm sure that's coming too. It's just a matter of time before they lower the interest rates even further. I don't know if we'll actually hit zero, but I can definitely see that rate cuts are already priced in, at least one this year and then more next year, both here in Europe and at the Fed and the U.S. And that's really, really good for Bitcoin. And now there's actually something happening on the political level in Germany. And I've already reported that the AfD might be looking to heavily invest in Bitcoin. There was also a discussion on our channel with Peter Berner, which you can check out, where we talked about the AfD's Bitcoin election program. And it turns out this wasn't just some empty talk. We can actually see that Bitcoin has been included in the AfD's election program. Here, as announced at the end of November, the AfD has included pro-Bitcoin passages in the draft program for the 2025 Bundestag election. So this is just the draft program, not the final decision or the final election program. But if it's in the draft, then it's quite likely that it will go through. And it says here, let me read you the whole paragraph. Bitcoin as a means of preserving freedom and state independence. That's the headline. Bitcoin is a welcome candidate in the competition of currencies as a state-free money. With a market capitalization in the trillion range and a significant circulation, Bitcoin now fulfills most of the functions of money. However, due to increasing national and international government trends, MiCA and so on, it is stated here, it is at risk. The AfD has been opposing this political regulatory pressure for years. The AfD is calling for extensive deregulation of Bitcoin, as well as Bitcoin wallets and trading platforms. We're advocating for the retention of the VAT exemption on Bitcoin transactions, the one-year period for taxing capital gains, and the right to self-custody of coins in self-managed wallets. We demand the preservation of freedom and state independence through tax and government restraint in politics. So, to be honest, one has to say that everything would actually be enforced here, just as it was announced in the discussion with Peter Berner, but it was also hinted at in the press release even before that. From what I see, everything would actually be implemented here. And what I find really striking is this passage that says Bitcoin should be seen as a candidate for money, because that's often the big sticking point. Like, for example, people say, yes, Bitcoin is not money, it is just an asset or something, it is just an object of speculation. But the fact that a party is actually standing up in the German political election program and saying Bitcoin is a candidate for money is really, really crazy. Just a few years ago, you could hardly imagine that. Now Bitcoin is on the same level as the euro, the dollar. Okay, that's not a perfect comparison, but at least maybe with gold, because gold is also seen as a candidate for money. Gold has been considered a candidate for money for hundreds of years, and now we actually see Bitcoin, which is only 15 years old, being raised to the same level. It doesn't go as far as saying, for example, says we now have a strategic Bitcoin reserve where we now somehow want to mine all the Bitcoin here in Germany, as Donald Trump says, which of course is also an exaggerated formulation, and so on. So, we don't have a completely aggressive campaign here. Regarding Bitcoin, it's more of a neutral to slightly positive campaign. But that's definitely something to be welcomed. At least someone is finally opening up to Bitcoin, and something is actually being done in that direction, because most parties just ignore it. But now you can also see, I found the crucial sentence that Peter Berner said, that he was basically forced to say something about Bitcoin because the community put so much pressure on him. In 2021, we also saw it yesterday with the savings banks that are now rolling out their Bitcoin offerings because, of course, the pressure is increasing. People want some kind of offer. They want to know something about it in politics. They want to know something about it in the economy. And that's basically how Bitcoin gets involved in all sorts of topics, whether it's politics, economics, or whatever. When the pressure from the bottom movement, meaning from the bottom up, increases, then the big players at the top, politicians, entrepreneurs, CEOs, the powerful, BlackRock, and so on, they have to give in to that pressure. It's no different with BlackRock. BlackRock simply had so much demand for Bitcoin ETFs that they simply had to bring the Bitcoin ETF to market at some point. I mean, Larry Fink was actually a Bitcoin opponent in the past, but at some point, he had to realize, hey, there's so much demand for this, we have to get in on it, and if we participate here, then of course we can benefit from it again. I mean, it's the same with the AfD, they can definitely capture voter support. For one company, it's like this. They tend to be able to make money here, and for other people, it's the same. They're ultimately involved in the Bitcoin game too. And anyone who is not here will probably be at a massive disadvantage compared to people who are open to Bitcoin. And that's why it's always about game theory. It's always smarter to participate in Bitcoin rather than fight against it. We've seen that every attempt to fight against Bitcoin has always backfired massively. That's just a historical observation, whether it was countries that opposed Bitcoin, or companies, or politicians, and so on. In hindsight, it never turned out well. It's always been the best option to open up as early as possible, and the earlier you open up, the more you benefit from it. I find the developments interesting and exciting. It's in the election program, but it may not be implemented. Some might say it's a minor mention and irrelevant, but you have. And some might criticize that it's just a tiny little mention and that it's basically irrelevant compared to the rest of the election program or something like that. But I mean, you have to start somewhere, right? Now we have the first step. It's at least mentioned in the election program, and then we can see how it develops from here. And I'll say this, if they get good feedback, if they realize in politics, hey, there's positive feedback coming in, people want this and so on, then they're probably going to push even harder for Bitcoin. That's just how things go. But if they notice, okay, they put it in the election program, and there's no feedback coming back, and people aren't interested at all, then they might eventually take it out again. That's just the way things go. But if you notice, okay, they put it in the election program, and there's no feedback coming back, and people aren't interested at all, then they might eventually take it out again. I also found it interesting that the AfD recently announced that they want to leave the Euro and the EU. I mean, this isn't anything new, but it would definitely fit if they want to leave the Euro and the EU. They mentioned in the report that they want to go back to the Deutsche Mark, but it would actually be even more bullish to say, okay, we also have the money candidate Bitcoin that we can support as well. But sure, maybe a whole economy in Germany isn't ready to build on Bitcoin just yet. I get that people might still be attached to fiat currencies, which is why they want to go back to the Deutsche Mark. But at least we have Bitcoin alongside it, and it's definitely worth something. And I'm just observing this neutrally. I'm not saying whether it's positive or negative or anything like that. Everyone has to decide for themselves. This isn't about pushing the AfD or anything like that, because there have been a lot of critical voices saying that politics shouldn't get involved with Bitcoin. There were also quite a few critical comments under the videos with the AfD politician, like, how can you even talk to someone like that, and so on. I think you should always be open, always talk to people, and I really felt like it was a fair conversation. For sure, if you want to buy Bitcoin now, check out the link in the video description below. I have a link to 21 Bitcoin, the easiest way to buy Bitcoin in Europe. Super easy, safe, and simple. With the code Bitcoin Hotel, you can get up to 20% off the fees here. I'll link everything for you down below. Feel free to subscribe here. That way, you help the channel gain traction so we can get even better interview partners and make even better videos. See you later. Peace out.